So before the Season 10 PTR for Diablo 4, I went over how I think the new Chaos Armor system coming with Season 10 is just going to be one of the best and most interesting new systems and features we have gotten in the history of Diablo 4. And after playing on the PTR and testing out the system and seeing how it interacts with different builds, I think that's absolutely true. I not only think that this system is incredibly good for a season, but I hope they change up the system a little bit and add it as a permanent feature in the game. And I think there's one small change I can make to Chaos Uniques that will make them easily applicable to the game going forward, where they wouldn't be super overpowered, but they would just allow for a lot more build variation. Now, if you haven't heard of Chaos Armor, it's currently a Season 10 specific system. Hopefully it will be brought forward after Season 10, but this is a new system that's essentially a variation on a lot of the uniques we currently have in the game. There's a long list of uniques that can be Chaos Uniques, but essentially it's taking the unique roles of other slots and allowing them to be on any of your armor pieces. So that's your helm, chest, gloves, pants, and boots. And this isn't just uniques from those slots. This can also be uniques from amulets, rings, or weapons. It can also be a bunch of uniques from armor slots, but they can also be on other armor slots. And outside of just being able to get all of the affix rolls and effects from a unique item on a different slot, you're also getting the innate roll. So for instance, if you had a rotting lightbringer, which is normally a two-handed mace, that usually comes with the innate roll of damage to poisoned enemies. That will also still be there on like gloves or something. So that's really strong, but these Chaos Armor also have a few different ways in which they roll. First off, they always have a greater affix, so they're always ancestral, and their unique effect is always a maximum roll for the unique effect, but it's buffed by 20%. And that again doesn't matter what slot it's in. So let's go over an example. If you play Druid or heard about Druid, you probably heard about the new unique of last season, which was a Rotting Lightbringer, which is normally a two-handed mace. It's an incredibly strong unique on your two-handed weapon, which is the most valuable slot in the game because it's either a two-handed unique or it's a really buffed up legendary aspect. This unique essentially created the strongest Druid build of last season and potentially the strongest build of last season, and you can get this in any of your armor slots as Chaos Armor. So you could instead get a Rotting Lightbringer as, say, a pair of pants, and it would still have all of the same affix rolls, it would still have the same unique effect, and that unique effect would be buffed up compared to what you can normally get it, and it would always be a max roll, and again, it would even have the innate roll of increased damage to poisoned enemies. So instead of needing a pulverized Druid build to have Rotting Lightbringers as two-handed weapon, you could put those on legs, and then you could get a legendary two-handed weapon and get the much stronger legendary aspect roll on that two-handed weapon. Just that small change massively increases the power of a build, but can also make some massive interactions. You could use a different legendary aspect on your two-handed weapon that could create some new effects. You could use a new two-handed unique weapon and essentially have the unique effect of two different two-handed unique weapons, which could be absolutely ridiculous. Now, there's a few different ways in which I think this system is actually incredibly cool and probably one of the most interesting systems to be added to Diablo 4. The first one is just new combinations and being able to get them in any of your armor slots. So I could get Rotting Lightbringer as boots, pants, gloves, chest armor, or helm. I could get it in any of those different slots I wanted to. So not only does that allow for a bunch of new combinations, it allows to much more easily choose where I want unique, so I could use different combinations. But there's also something really interesting that happens with the Season 10 implementation of Chaos Armor. Because the unique roll is a max out roll, but also 20% stronger, you actually want to have most of your uniques as a different slot. And more specifically, all of the uniques that have some power roll on it, like the Rotting Lightbringer has 2 different rolls on it. So if you can get those to be 20% stronger, that's just massive, because pretty much any of the uniques that have like an actual variation roll on it to where you can get different power based on the roll, pretty much every unique you're using like that, that roll on the unique is actually super important for your overall power. So being able to get those not only max out, but also 20% stronger stronger means every unique you're using in Season 10, you will want to put in one of your 5 different armor slots and have it be a Chaos Armor role, which could kind of sound bad because you're just searching for a lot of Chaos Armor, but that's just giving you more things to go loot, and I think Chaos Armor is actually going to feel a lot better than getting most other uniques. It also is going to change up almost every build in the game, because it doesn't actually make sense to keep any unique roles in their normal slots not being Chaos Armor if you can change them to a Chaos Armor role, because they're just going to be stronger. And for the overall game, I think that means that just going from Season 9 to Season 10 is going to have the biggest variation in builds we've seen from any other point in the game, which I think is actually a really good thing. It'll change up pretty much all the builds, which will be much more interesting if you're running the same builds you've run previously. It'll allow for a lot more variation and new possibility of builds. It'll allow for a bunch of new combinations, old builds being much stronger. It will also potentially allow for some builds that couldn't exist before to exist now, because you can just get uniques that could be much stronger in some of the less valuable slots. Like for instance, pants. Pants don't usually have things that increase your output a lot. If you're using legendary pants, it's pretty much all for defensives or just like a main stat increase, and usually for some like utility legendary aspect role. But if you could say get like a unique weapon or amulet role and put them on those pants, you can now essentially double the most powerful slots, which could allow for new uniques that can just allow for builds that wouldn't be able to exist previously. And I think that's actually going to happen for a handful of different builds. And I'm not just making this video because I want to talk about how cool Chaos Armor actually is. That's just part of it. The other part is I want Chaos Armor to exist past Season 10. And I think the best way to do that is to just not have Chaos Armor have max roll unique effects and not have it be buffed, because having it be max roll unique effects and have it be buffed on top of that means you basically just always want Chaos Armor. I think they're just way too strong like that. And while it does remove the effect of wanting to change up where your uniques are, I think it's just generally too strong. And I think if the developers did that, it would allow them to just add Chaos Armor as a new, more rare version of uniques without having to do much outside of that. So a part of me making this video is just to give my opinion and feedback that I want Chaos Armor to be in the game past Season 10, even if it's nerfed versions, which I think they probably should be nerfed versions, because I think that would just be better for the game. Now, one of the big reasons I could see them not having Chaos Armor past Season 10 is because we know we're getting some pretty big overhauls past Season 10. The developers have been teasing it. They not only had calls with a bunch of content creators and press, but they also flew a bunch of them out to Blizzard HQ to pretty much test a bunch of these overhauls. We've gotten it kind of teased that these overhauls are going to touch a lot of the game. Itemization, skill trees, systems, new content, endgame content, all that stuff. It seems like they're kind of making a Diablo 4 2.0 behind the scenes. So if they're doing that, and if these big overhauls are going to touch gear and itemization, it might make sense that they don't want to add that into whatever the new overhauled version of the game is going to be after Season 10 or sometime in the future. So if we don't get Chaos Armor at least before those big overhauls, that could be a very big reason why. But I very much hope that at some point in Diablo 4's future, we get Chaos Armor back as a much more rare role, but just as a thing that allows us to get those unique roles in different armor slots, which I think it just adds so much variation and build potential. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.